Hello everyone, Justin Vacula here with video number 4 of my Stoic Philosophy video series. Again, I'll be talking about Epictetus Discourse, 2 chapters in this video. Book 1, Chapter 3, What Should We Conclude from the Principle that God is the Father of Mankind, and Book 1, Chapter 4, On Progress. Find me online at justinvacula.com, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for some of the recent feedback. I'm adding a picture-in-picture display to the bottom right of my screen and a slideshow rather than just one slide. So let's get into the text here. Chapter 3 is pretty short. It's less than 1 page here, talking about the nature of humankind, that which is distinct from animals or beasts, as is referred to here. Epictetus says, in our birth we have 2 common elements mingled within us, a body in common with the animals, and reason and intelligence in common with the gods. Every man must deal with each thing according to the opinion that he holds about it. We are born to fidelity and honor, a securely grounded use of our impressions, and will harbor no abject or ignoble thought about ourselves, while the multitude will think the opposite. So here, there's an argument that we should be gracious for the traits that we have. We have the ability to reason, we have intelligence. This is something that's granted to us by nature, or the gods as described in this chapter. A lot of the terminology is used interchangeably, a different sense that the Greek thinkers have here than many people in the West today have about a god, about a supernatural entity. Here it's words about God, the gods, reason, nature, but some different things here. So here, if we're making correct judgments, we shouldn't have these poor thoughts about ourselves. We should be able to handle situations as they come, which is a common theme in the Stoic literature here, and have realistic thoughts, positive thoughts, rather than being in a miserable state, as we'll hear about in the next chapter on progress. Talking about the multitude thinking the opposite. Well, many perhaps won't be gracious. They won't have gratitude, saying, oh, well, we do have these great characteristics about ourselves. We can reason, we can do these great things. We can aspire to virtue. Whereas in the animals, in Epictetus' view, can't do this. They don't have reason and cognition. Perhaps a more modern view will show that some animals do have the capacity, although not to the same extent as humans. We see that maybe dolphins, primates have some capacity for self-reflection, some learning, some progress. But this is ancient Greece. I think what he's going for here is more of having gratitude and not becoming abject. He mentions here that some will become roguish. Because of this kinship with the mortal, some of us deviate toward it to become more like wolves, faithless and treacherous and noxious. Others like lions, wild and savage and untamed. But most of us become like foxes, the most roguish of living creatures. For what else is a slanderous and ill-natured man than a fox? Or something yet more wretched and mean? Look then, and take care that you do not become one of these roguish creatures. So it's obvious that if we're not careful, we can go into a bad path, not make good use of our lives, not live a good life, be treacherous, and have negative qualities about ourselves, not treat others well, and not aspire toward virtue. So here we're told to have gratitude, to make use of what nature has given us, and live a good life. So a pretty short chapter there in chapter 3. So we'll move on here to Book 1, Chapter 4, on progress. Epictetus writes, the man who is making progress, having learned from the philosophers that desire has good things for its object and aversion bad things, and having also learned that peace of mind and serenity can only be attained by a man if he achieves what he desires and does not fall into what he wants to avoid. Such a man has either rid himself of desire altogether or put it off to another time, and applies aversion only to things that are within the sphere of choice. Here, desire is a common theme in the Stoic literature, talking about which desires should we have, what is good about life, what should we aspire to. Well, clearly the Stoics would say we should aspire toward virtue, but external things that we don't have control over, we can lead ourselves into a poor peace of mind if we're going to fret about externals. If we're going to think we can have choice over things we do not, we'll ultimately end up disappointed on Epictetus's view. We want to have good desires, reasonable desires, and avoid the bad things in life. Although it seems Epictetus understands here that we cannot avoid things entirely. Certain things are outside of our sphere of choice. We can maybe put them off. We can still go toward things that we desire that perhaps we shouldn't or aren't the best things. So we're to consider, what is it that we should aspire to? What is it that we should avoid? How much should we avoid it? When should we indulge perhaps in things that aren't as great and aren't as virtuous? Some interesting things here in this passage. So we're supposed to focus on things that are within the sphere of choice. Again, a central theme in Stoic philosophy. He says that we will be unhappy if we fall into things, despite our aversion, outside our sphere of choice. He writes, "If virtue promises happiness, an untroubled mind, and serenity, then progress toward virtue is certainly progress toward each of these. For whatever is the definitive end to which the perfection of a thing leads, progress is always an approach toward it." So again, we see a theme here that we're not going to be perfect. We're working toward perfection. We're working toward virtue. It's a difficult path, but we can get there. We can better our lives. We can make good decisions. We can live this virtuous life, or at least yearn toward it. If we're going to rid ourselves of desires, then that should lead to a happier life. But again, what about good desires? What are the things that we should desire? That's a question that we have to ask. And here he's going to talk about complaining. Is it a good thing if we're to complain? What should we realize that is within and outside of our sphere of choice? He writes, "The first areas of study are the first and most necessary. But if, trembling and lamenting all the while, you never seek to fall into misfortune, how, I ask you, are you making progress?" So here, we're not to complain about the things in life that we can't control. We're not going to complain about our current condition, or we're going to work toward not doing that in order to grin and bear it, to take things as they come, and to recognize, as we've seen in previous chapters, that we can deal with hardships, that we can overcome some setbacks in our life, to deal in stride with them, to be gracious that we have that reasoning faculty. We have the choice to deal with our impressions in the world, to live accordingly, and to live a good life. He continues, "Show me then your progress in this point. It is as if I were talking to an athlete and said, 'Show me your shoulders,' and he then replied, 'Look at my jumping weights.' That is quite enough of you and your jumping weights. What I want to see is what the jumping weights serve to achieve." So what are your goals here? What progress can you show in improving your life? Don't just show me your life as it is, but how are you looking to live a good life? What progress are you making? He continues, "If you are acting in harmony with nature, give me evidence of that, and I will say that you are making progress. But if you are acting out of harmony, go your way, and do not merely comment on these treatises, but even write such works yourself. And what will you gain by it? Do you not know that the whole book sells for 5 denarii? So is the person who expounds it, do you suppose, worth more than 5 denarii? Never look for your work in one place and your progress in another." So we're going to live in accordance with virtues. We're going to look to show evidence of progress. We're going to try to apply virtue to all areas of our life and improve our condition. He continues, "If any of you, withdrawing himself from externals, turns to his own faculty of choice, working at it and perfecting it, so as to bring it fully into harmony with nature, elevated, free, unrestrained, unhindered, faithful, self-respecting, if he has learned too that whoever desires or is averse to things outside his own power can never be faithful nor free, but must necessarily be changed and tossed back and forth with them, must necessarily too be subject to others who can procure or prevent what he desires or wants to avoid." So a lot in this passage here. He's talking about the benefits of living a rational life, benefit of reason, that if we're to focus on our choices, our decisions, ourselves, we'll have all of these benefits. We'll be in harmony with nature. We'll be elevated, free, unrestrained, unhindered, self-respecting. We'll have these virtues here. We'll be content with life, or even happy, as it was stated before. But if we're to focus on things outside of our choice, this isn't going to be good. We're going to be tossed back and forth. It'll be this roller coaster of trying to change things we can't, trying to hope that things will be better when clearly we have no control in this matter. And again, it's a thing of examining, as I've said in previous videos, what control we can have over situations. What are some reasonable hopes that we can have? What choice can we have in areas of our life? He continues here, if finally when he rises in the morning he observes and keeps these rules, bathes and eats as a man of fidelity and honor, and thus in every manner that befalls puts his guiding principles to work, just as the runner does in the business of running, or the voice trainer in the trainer of voices. This is the man who is truly making progress. This is not the man who has not traveled in vain. But if he is wholly intent on reading books, and has labored in that only, and gone abroad to the sake of that, I bid him go home immediately, and not neglect his domestic affairs, for what he has traveled for is nothing. So here we can read about virtue, but we have to act. We have to apply virtue to our lives. We have to make progress. We have to work toward improving ourselves, putting these guiding principles to work, and in every manner, whether it's running, whether it's singing, whatever job, whatever area we have, we can apply virtue, unless it's an unvirtuous position, but that's something to consider. What should we be doing with our lives? The Stoics don't seem to say this is the job you should have, this is the role in life you should have, but they're saying here that people can play different roles. In other chapters, there's talk about knowing our own strengths and acting accordingly to them, as is mentioned a bit in this chapter too. So we can have virtue, we can be honorable in many areas in life. He continues here, what matters is studying how to rid life of lamentation and complaint and cries of, alas, how miserable I am, and misfortune and disappointment. Move the slide here. So we don't want to create trouble for ourselves and complaining and being miserable. We can just look at the world and say, well, this is how things are. What can we do to change our situation? How should we react? How should we use our impressions, what we think about the external world? What is a reasonable way to go about things? And how could we better our situation? Accepting things in stride here. Learn what death, what exile, what prison, what hemlock is. So again, reflecting on negative things, things that can happen to us. Death, he's saying, is an indifferent in previous chapters, and that we don't have control over this. This is just a natural stage of life. Exile, well, it might happen to be the case that we'll be outcasts, that will be placed outside of our lands from some ruler, from some tyrant. And what prison, what hemlock is, there's discussion of prison, of discussion of hemlock here in reference to Socrates, and making the virtuous choices. Talk in other chapters of a prison can only be something of one's own mind, that if they're making choices, they're being free, then that is not prison. We'll get into that in future videos. He continues writing here, if this is what pleases the gods, so be it, and not, wretched old man that I am, it is for this that I have kept my gray hairs. Who says such things? Do you suppose I will mention to you some mean and despicable person? Does not Priam say such things? Does not Oedipus? How many kings do so? For what else is tragedy but a portrayal in tragic verse of the sufferings of men who have devoted their admiration to external things? So we're going to understand the way the world is. If we're old, well, be content with our situation. We've aged, and be gracious even that we've lived to be an old person, that we have experience, that we have wisdom, and that we can make the most of our current opportunities, our current state in life, but to not complain about it. This complaining, he's saying, isn't helping our situation. It's just going to make things worse for us. We're going to be the author of our own tragedy. A portrayal in the tragic verse, the sufferings of men, devoting admiration to external things. So the focus isn't on the external world, it's on reason, it's on virtue. And if we're going to be focused on appearances, as it seems to be here, that's not going to be a good way to go about things. We're going to focus on the good things in life, things that we have control over. Aging here, well, it's just a stage of the body to age. We're going to get older, we're going to have gray hair, and that's something that we should understand and even prepare for when he's talking about learning what death is, what exile is. He continues, not merely of living, but of living well. He's talking about living a good life, not just living and making a waste of life, perhaps, but rather applying virtue, aspiring toward greatness, personal excellence. These are some lofty goals that he presents and things that we should work toward, living a good life, making the best of what we have. A wonderful fruit in the human mind, the true doctrine of happiness, he says. So this is true doctrine of happiness, being content in cultivating virtue rather than being focused on the externals, as was mentioned before, or focused on pleasure, as some of the other schools of the time might be. So that's about it for chapters 3 and 4 here in Epictetus's Discourses. Stay tuned for future videos. Like, share, subscribe, comment, and feel free to share feedback. Thanks for watching.